What's up, everyone? We are diving back into the multiverse today for another epic. What if Naruto got harem with Hinata Anko Tenten and Ino Part 3? If you enjoy this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more fanfics like this. Now, let's dive right into the fanfic. Naruto yawned as he sat back on a bench drinking in the warm waves of the sun. He smiled lightly as he rested his head on a certain cage's lap. The entire summit knew what Naruto had done. He had tamed two of the cages and taken a woman from the other three. While A and Gaara didn't seem to mind, Unoki was fuming. Uzumaki. A voice thundered out. Naruto shot up, seeing the short old cage walking towards him with rage in his eyes. Yo Gramps, what's up? Naruto asked as he rubbed his eyes. What have you done to my granddaughter? Unoki asked with his commanding voice. I slept with her, a lot, Naruto said. Excuse me? Unoki asked. Oh, I'm sorry, your old ear's missing things. Naruto asked. I had sex with her. Naruto said one word at a time. You defiled my granddaughter and you admit to doing it. His voice thundered. First off, I wouldn't say defiled. She came to me, and yes, I'm not going to lie. We had sex, lot of sex, and she claimed that she would move to the leaf to live with me, Naruto replied. You little, Unoki growled before he was silenced. Now you wouldn't be threatening one of my shinobi, would you? Tsunade asked, standing up to glare down at Unoki. Unoki grumbled to himself, then turned his eyes on Tsunade. This conversation involves me and the boy, he said, his eyes still burned with rage. Hey, get this through that old fence-sitting skull of yours, Naruto said, gaining the man's attention. Your granddaughter came to me. She wanted me. She loves me. You may be her grandfather, but you have no control over her heart, Naruto explained as the very topic of their argument walked up with a smile on her face. Naruto-sama, Kuretsuchi nearly sung as she reached them. Ku-chan, I told you I hate being called Sama outside of the bedroom, Naruto grinned, making the girl blush. Oh, sorry, I forget that, she smiled and stuck out her tongue. Unoki clenched his fist as he looked at Naruto. What's your real problem? That I'm Minato's son, or that I have several women already? Because as bad as it sounds, I'd wager you're more upset about the former than the latter, Naruto said, getting Unoki to pause. Grandfather, I'm going with him, Kuretsuchi said, steeling herself for anything her grandfather might say. Too much like your mother, fine. I hereby release you from your duties as a kunoichi of Iowa, Unoki said as he rubbed his brow. Thank you, grandfather, Kuretsuchi shouted as she hugged him. Unoki said nothing as his granddaughter hugged him. Come on, Naruto, we should be packing to head home, Tsunade said. Yeah, you're right, though I was hoping to lay down a little longer. Oh well, Naruto said as he and Tsunade left the two as they started to say their goodbyes. You are sure about this? A red-haired man asked as he looked to a rather nervous-looking woman. I am, she replied, looking to her brother. I know you may not be happy. Nonsense, you are happy, that's all that matters, Gaara replied as he surprisingly hugged his sister. You're okay with it? Temari asked. I am. Now, while I might not agree with Naruto having several women, I won't deny your happiness with him, Gaara explained as he pulled back. The papers are signed and you are free to move to the Hidden Leaf. Thank you, Gaara. Temari smiled happily as she was given the papers. She gave one more bow, then left so she could head home to pack and move to Konoha. Naruto yawned lightly as the small group neared Konoha. He was overjoyed to be home but was still tired. A slow grin came to his face as an idea popped into his head. Oh Lord, I've seen that look before, Tsunade spoke as she glanced back to see a rather devious grin on Naruto's face. Naruto gave her a light wink before he pulled out a tri-pronged kunai. When on earth did you? Tsunade asked before he was gone. When did Naruto learn that? Shizune asked, looking to Suand. I couldn't tell you, I would have thought he would have used it before, Tsunade said, unable to place when he could have learned the technique. Oh, that's not fair, Shizune said. I know he just leaves us behind, Tsunade said. No, not that, he's going to get started without me, Shizune said with saddened eyes. He really made you a pervert, Tsunade said as she shook her head. Don't lie, you want more, Shizune said as she picked up her pace slightly. I never said I didn't, Tsunade replied as she too started to walk a little faster. Naruto appeared in his apartment with his grin still plastered on his face. His ears quickly perked hearing the telltale sounds of SX. He moved with all the stealth he had and found what he was looking for. Inside Sakura's room, what quite the feast for his eyes. Faster! Sakura cried out as Ayame laid over her, pounding into her with a strap on. Ayame groaned as the reverse side of said toy vibrated against her core. Sakura's back arched up as she gripped the sheet of the bed they were sharing. Are you really just going to watch? Kurama's voice echoed out. Well, you've been quiet for quite a while, haven't you? Naruto retorted. I've been enjoying the show, Kurama joked. What a show, right? Naruto replied, nearly laughing. And it's just getting started. Kurama's laugh echoed through his mind, making Naruto smile as he turned his attention back to the two girls before him. God, you're such a whore, Ayame moaned out as she moved her IPS as fast as she could, which was nowhere as fast as Sakura wanted. And you're too damn slow, Sakura growled. Sakura, what did I tell you? Naruto spoke, making both girls stop. Naruto. Ayame smiled happily. Master. Sakura tried to move. Hey, what did I tell you? Naruto asked. To always obey the others, Sakura replied. So what should you be doing? Naruto asked as he pulled in a chair and sat down. Sakura paused, then gave a slow nod. Please, Mistress Ayame, fuck me more, Sakura begged as her legs wrapped around Ayame's waist. Said brunette smiled and started to move her IPS again. Sakura's back started to arch once again as pleasure was pushed into her system once more. Ayame leaned down and started to kiss and lightly bite at Sakura's neck, making her moan louder. Go for her collarbone, it's more sensitive, Naruto said with a grin, and he watched the two. Ayame obeyed and turned her lips onto Sakura's collar. Ayame. Sakura cried out as her body trembled heavily from Ayame's kisses. Ayame stopped as her body reached her climax. God, I wish I was a ninja now, I can't keep up with you guys, Ayame said slowly as she pulled off to sensitive to keep going. Naruto rubbed his chin for a moment. I know what you're thinking, and yes you can, Kurama's voice echoed out. Ayame, come here, Naruto said. Ayame obeyed and started to take the toy off. Leave that on, you'll need it for her, Naruto added. Ayame shrugged, then moved to her lover. Focus your chakra into your teeth, then bite her neck and I'll give her a healthy dose of stamina, Kurama said with a cackle. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment and focused his chakra into his teeth. He felt his canines grow and he grabbed Ayame and sunk his teeth into her neck. Not to his surprise, but Ayame moaned loudly, loving the pain. She was one hell of a masochist. Oh Naruto, I feel funny, Ayame said as she felt something pulsing into her. After a few moments she started to feel stronger and really horny. Just a little more and it will become permanent, Kurama called out. What are the side effects? Naruto asked. Increased stamina, increased senses, and of course increased sexual urges, Kurama replied. So I just made her hornier and last longer? Naruto asked as his teeth pulled away. Yup. Not sick her on the pink SLT, Kurama said. There you go, now go give Sakura a good fucking, Naruto grinned. Ayame grinned as she moved to Sakura. Said Pinkett was on her hands and knees lightly shaking her as for her mistress. Like I said, whore, Ayame said as she grabbed Sakura's HPS and slammed into her in one thrust. Sakura's head flew back as an ecstasy-filled screams erupted from her throat with each of Ayame's thrusts. You know, I think she's getting off too easy. Let her over here, I could use a blowjob, Naruto commanded. Ayame nodded and rather easily lifted Sakura up while keeping the falsehood impaled inside of her. Naruto unzipped his pants and freed his raging COK. He had been hard for too long in his mind. Sakura licked her lips seeing Naruto's COK. The moment it was within her reach she started to UCK at it. Her head started to bob quickly as she lovingly worked her Mazer's COC. At a girl, Naruto ran a hand into Sakura's hair as her head bobbed. Sakura moaned onto his COC as Ayame started to move her IPS again. What did you do to me? Ayame asked, seeing she could thrust faster and harder than ever before. Infused you with some of Kurama's chakra. You'll be able to keep up with the others now, Naruto explained as he forced more of his COC into Sakura's throat, hearing her gag lightly on him. Thanks, Ayame said as she gripped Sakura's HPS tighter and her HPS picked up their pace once more. Sakura moaned with each thrust from Ayame. Naruto groaned in approval as her voice vibrated on his hardness. Ah yeah, suck it. Naruto started to buck his IPS, forcing his COC deeper into her throat. Sakura's eyes were rolling back as she felt her body being pounded from both ends. This was the purest form of ecstasy for the Pinkett. Her nails dug into the ground as she felt Naruto's COC throb. Her eyes widened and her mouth started to water more. He was getting close and she wanted to drink down every drop. Her head started to bob faster as her tongue worked over his length as much as possible. Ah, I'm going to come, Ayame moaned out as her pace reached its maximum. Her legs burned as exhaustion rose in her, but she couldn't bring herself to stop. It simply felt too good to stop. Same here, Naruto groaned. Here it comes, drink it all, Naruto commanded as he let himself go and blew his load down her throat. Sakura happily gulped down rope after rope of Naruto's seed. Naruto removed his COC from her throat before he could finish coming. His last few spurts shot over her face, making Sakura moan loudly. I love it when you come on my face, Sakura said as she collected the extra cum on her cheeks, forehead and chin, quickly gulping it down with another deep moan. How's it going, Ayame? Naruto asked. So close, can't stop, too good, Ayame moaned as her IPS slapped against Sakura's ass. Sakura gripped Naruto's pants as she started to lose the strength in her arms to keep herself up. Sakura, mistress. The two cried out in unison as they came together. Naruto smiled as he ran a hand through his hair, watching the two tremble in their orgasms. Sakura panted heavily as she looked up at Naruto. Thanks you, Naruto-sama, Sakura spoke weakly. Ayame leaned forward, too tired to hold herself up. Naruto, how long will this last? Ayame asked, wondering if she would be able to keep up with the others from now on. Should be permanent, Naruto replied, and he put his still hard COC away and stood. Now if you two are satisfied for the moment, I have somewhere to be, Naruto smiled as he saw the girls nod. Tsunade sat behind her desk finishing the last of her paperwork for the day with a big smile. Thanks to Naruto telling her about using shadow clones to help with the less important paperwork, she was able to fly through it and complete the entire day's work in a few hours. Her attention turned towards the village as she looked out, wondering what her blonde-haired lover was up to at the moment. Tsunade-sama, you're done with your work? Shizune asked in shock. Yup, Naru-kun informed me on a great way to speed up my paperwork, Tsunade replied as the door opened. Konohamaru, Moegi, Udon and Ebisu reporting in after the completion of AC ranked mission, Ebisu said with a bow. All well done, you four. Now Ebisu, I have a request for you, Tsunade spoke. Anything, milady, Ebisu said with bow. I want to test one of my shinobi to see if he would be ready to lead a team. I thought your team, while not too experienced and not under-experienced, would be the perfect one to use to test said shinobi, Tsunade explained. Of course, who's the shinobi? Nara-san. Perhaps Aburame-san? Ebisu asked. Tsunade smiled lightly and snapped her fingers. Ebisu looked up to see the window open and Naruto step in. Naruto, of course. I plan to make him a Jonin either way, but he has shown a desire to train and had requests to be made a Jonin sensei, Tsunade explained. Boss. Oh, so cool, you're going to lead us on a mission, Konohamaru grinned. I was hoping to see if I could in fact lead a squad, Naruto replied. I guess, but I would request an easier C ranked or a high D ranked due to Naruto inexperience in leading, Ebisu requested. No, I thought I'd send them on an S ranked suicide mission, Tsunade said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I meant no offense, milady, Ebisu bowed again. None taken, I understand, I've never led before, Naruto replied. Well, it's settled then. For the next mission, Team Ebisu will become Team Naruto, Tsunade said. Now then, Naruto, I have some great news for you, Tsunade said as Team Ebisu was shown out by Shizune. It's done, Naruto asked quickly. The Namikaze Uzumaki clan compound is in fact complete, Tsunade explained. But I thought it should have taken another month to finish. Naruto asked. It should have, but once a certain bridge builder and would release shinobi learned it was for you, they both came and chipped in to finish the compound. Thanks to Yamato, the compound was finished beyond expectations. And thanks to Tazuna, it was made better than you had thought it would be. Tsunade smiled happily. Perfect. Naruto summoned several shadow clones. NC1 report home and tell Sakura, Ayame, Anko and Ino to start packing, Naruto said pointing to the first clone. NC2 find Kurenai and Hiruzen and tell her that she can start packing as well, Naruto said to the second clone. NC3 go to Suna and tell Tamari she can move here now that the home is done, Naruto turned said as the first 3 clones left. NC4 and NC5 same mission and NC3 but Takumo for Kaori and Iwa for Kuretsuchi, Naruto said as the 2 clones bowed and left quickly after the others. Your clones can make those trips? Shizune asked. Normally no, but I fused them with significantly larger amounts of chakra so they can make the trips, Naruto explained as he beckoned Shizune to him. Said Mednin moved to him. Once Hokage-sama is done with you I want you to start packing too, Naruto explained. What about Hinata? Tsunade asked noticing he had left her out. I already promised I visit her when I got back so I'll go myself, Naruto said as his eyes turned onto Tsunade. Also I fully expect you to move in too Hokage-sama, Naruto grinned. Not until I pass this hat on which I can't do until I'm sure you can lead a genin team, Tsunade replied. Gotcha just a little longer then, Naruto smiled as he turned around. See you later Suna-chan, Naruto grinned as he jumped out of the window and vanished into the village. A young brunette woman sat in her parents' weapon shop, her fingers drumming over the counter as she waited for someone to come in. With a bored sigh she let her eyes slowly start to close. Just as she felt like sleep was going to claim her, the bell rang and someone entered. Welcome to Cage's Armaments, my name is Tenten, how may I be of assistance? Tenten said looking up to see Naruto. Hello Tenten, how have you been? Said Blonde asked. Not too bad, how's the stud been? Tenten asked. Stud? Naruto asked. Please, you've claimed just about all my friends as lovers, so who do you think they talk about when we get together? Tenten asked. Ah, yeah, can't help that, Naruto said as he rubbed the back of his head with a sly grin. Actually I'm sure you could. But hell, if you can have them all, why not, right? Tenten asked. I can't tell if you mad that I have several girlfriends or that you're not one of them, Naruto replied, making Tenten blush heavily. I'm not into sharing, Tenten retorted quickly. I think it's quite the opposite, but you're just too shy and embarrassed about it, Naruto said as he approached the counter. No I'm not, I don't like to share, Tenten said slightly louder. Still not too believable, Naruto said as he reached the counter. Could it be you are worried about losing someone close again so you've walled your heart off? Naruto asked. I don't know what you're talking about, Tenten replied. Please, I can see the pain in your eyes. You aren't the only one that misses him. Hinata still cries herself to sleep some nights. Even I can't console her enough to take away all the pain. And you loved him and you've dealt with it by yourself, Naruto explained as he placed his hand over hers. The simply touch broke her down and she jumped into his arms and started to bawl. Naruto said nothing and simply held her in his arms. He slowly ran his arms around her and held her close, letting her vent her pain. Several minutes passed and her tears finally slowed. Her breathing slowly returned to normal speed and she slowly pulled back. Thanks, I needed to do that, Tenten said as she felt Naruto's thumb run over her cheek, wiping away the last tear, then ran down her cheek. Someone as beautiful as you shouldn't hold her feelings, Naruto said as he slowly pulled back. You know you were right, Tenten said slowly. About what? Naruto asked. I loved Neji, but not the way everyone thought I did. We never had romantic feelings for each other, he became my brother. I always thought I'd be doing him a dishonor if I cried over him, Tenten explained. Wow, I really misread you then, Naruto said, rubbing the back of his head again. You and everyone else, Tenten smiled. How about I take you out for dinner tonight, Naruto suggested with a soft smile. Trying to add me to your harem? Tenten asked. I didn't have plans to do that, Naruto said with a light blush. Bullshit, Kurama's voice echoed through his skull. Quiet you, Naruto retorted quickly. I'd like that actually, Tenten said with a smile. What time do you get off? Naruto asked. 6. So how about you pick me up around 6:15 or so, Tenten replied. 6:15, got it, I'll see you then, Naruto said as he gave another smile and grabbed a bundle of kunai. And I'll buy these. Tenten smiled and rang him up, then watched him leave. Would it be so bad? Tenten thought as she returned to her boring wait for the next customer. Hinata stood alone, feeling a soft breeze moving over the field. She opened her eyes slowly and gave a nod to a figure a few feet away from her. A smaller girl returned the nod, then charged in her palms at the ready. Hinata rather easily dodged and countered her sister's strike. She had long since stopped letting Hanabi win. She hadn't noticed it was actually hindering Hanabi to hold back. She wasn't learning the flaws of her stance or her strikes. Hanabi, like me, you are a water release. You need to move more fluidly like water. Not so jagged like the rest of our clan. You and I are all water, just like our mother was, while the majority of the clan is earth releases. So we need to move like water, not like rocks. Quick and fluid, not jagged and forced, Hinata explained as she corrected her sister once more. Not to mention moving like water is way hotter, a voice said from behind the two. Naruto. Hinata spun around to see her love standing a few feet away. Hey Hinata. Hanabi. Naruto smiled at the two. Uzumaki-san. Hanabi bowed lightly. Naruto, please. I don't like titles and stuff like that, Naruto said, waving his hands. He's nothing like out family Imouto, Hinata said with a smile as she moved towards Naruto. Their arms encircled each other and a moment later their lips met. I still find it strange that you're willing to share like that, Hanabi said. I love everything about Naruto, so I sort of shrugged it off, Hinata smiled. If Konohamaru even tried that with me, I'd have his balls, Hanabi said with a smile. You're dating Konohamaru? Oh, I'm so picking on him. He wouldn't tell me who his girlfriend was. I suspect it's because I'm with Hinata, Naruto grinned. No, he doesn't tell because father would force us apart, Hanabi replied. Why, Konohamaru is from a high-ranking clan, it's not like he's clanless, Naruto retorted as Hinata kissed at his neck. Long story and I have to get going, father's going to notice I'm gone soon, Hanabi said as she ran off. Naruto, I've missed you so much, Hinata said. I know, let's go home, Naruto said as he put an arm around his indigo-haired lover and left the field. Tenten had just finished closing the shop up when Naruto appeared in her doorway with a soft smile on his face. Am I too early? He asked. No, I'm just behind is all, Tenten replied. Naruto gave a nod and leaned against the wall waiting for his date. So why'd you ask me out if you've got what, 9 girls? Tenten asked. Ayame, Shizune, Ino, Hinata, Anko, Sakura, Karui, Kurosuchi, Tamari, Kurenai, Tsunade, Mei, so 12, Naruto said with a laugh. Tenten on the other hand was left in complete shock. The Hokage? Tenten asked. Oh yeah, excluding her and Mei, everyone else is being moved into my now finished clan compound, Naruto explained. So how many of them are pregnant? Tenten asked as she finished closing up. I'm not sure about Mei, but none of the others should be. I have them taking contraceptives and whatnot, Naruto explained. And you're hoping to add me to your list of lovers? Tenten asked. I would never force you, Tenten. None of the girls are with me against their will, Naruto replied. That wasn't a no, Tenten tried not to laugh. Okay, fine. Truth be told, I've gotten greedy, Naruto said, raising his hands in defeat. Well, if you do good enough, I might just give in, Tenten smiled as she walked by. I look forward to winning your heart, Naruto said as he led her outside for their date to begin. Naruto stood looking over his clan compound as a literal horde of himself carried boxes, couches, beds, tables, and just about everything else they would need. Naruto, have I ever told you that you are efficient as hell? Ino smiled as the last of her clothes were taken into the compound. You know the boss, Naruto's clone smiled. So how's Tenten? Ino asked. If the night is going according to plan, they should be taking a walk through the park, the clone replied. Is he planning on sleeping with her? Ino asked. Up to Tenten, you know the boss, he doesn't force anyone, the clone replied as he saw Anko, Ayame and Sakura all walk into the compound. I have a feeling Sakura is about to get gangbanged, Ino said, trying not to laugh. You know Anko, she loves to dominate you girls, Naruto said with a chuckle. Tonight was amazing, Naruto, Tenten spoke as they stood in front of her apartment. Naruto smiled and inclined his head slightly. I'm glad you enjoyed yourself. Naruto replied with a soft smile. How could I not? Dinner at the Emperor's Garden where they have the best sesame dumplings, a walk through the park, and even a stop at the fortune teller. You know how to treat a girl, Tenten smiled. You deserve it, Naruto smiled. He was about to turn and leave when he felt Tenten's arms wrap around his neck, forcing their lips together. Naruto's arms snaked behind her back, holding her body against his. You, me, bed, now, Tenten said as she panted. Naruto smiled and nodded, letting her lead him into her home. No surprise, it was wall-to-wall weapons and scrolls. Are you sure? Naruto asked once they were in her bedroom. Yes, now strip, Tenten smiled as she started to pull off her clothes. Naruto on the other hand moved to her and wrapped his arms around her neck. So impatient, let me show you what I can do if you bid your time, Naruto said, stopping her from pulling off her shirt. Tenten turned in his arms and relinquished her body to the blonde boy. Naruto pushed her down onto the bed and slowly undid the front of her shirt. His lips quickly found their way to her neck and started to attack her soft skin. Ah, Naruto. Tenten gasped, feeling his lips and tongue on her neck and shoulders. She started to pant lightly, feeling his hands moving down her body, pulling away her shirt. Naruto gave a light chuckle. So sensitive, Naruto said as one hand found her cloth-covered mounds. His fingers deftly ran over her, the bandages teasing her through the cloth. He wasn't surprised to see that she didn't wear a BR. The bandages she chose to wear made her all the sire. Tenten's back arched lightly, feeling his hands slowly removing the bandages as his lips and tongue moved to her collar and down to her chest. She yelped lightly when her briefs were free and his lips found her stiffened nipples. Oh Kami, touch me more, Tenten begged. I plan to, Naruto replied as he moved a hand lower. Tenten's eyes shot wide when she felt his hand slip into her pants and started to rub over her panty-clad womanhood. Tenten cried out as her back arched more and her toes started to curl. Naruto said nothing and continued to toy with the weapon's mistress. Her body was incredibly sensitive and he loved it. Tenten moaned lightly as Naruto ran his tongue over her body and his fingers started to push at her entrance. She felt her pants getting pulled down slowly as Naruto descended her body. His lips moved over her toned belly. He gave a couple extra kisses to her navel before her pants were removed and she was left in her panties. Oh please don't stop, Tenten begged as she felt his breath on her womanhood. His tongue slowly slid out and over her femininity. The first lick earned him one hell of a moan from her. Tenten's eyes rolled back slightly, just feeling his tongue touch her once. Nice taste, Naruto smiled as he licked her again and started to tease her lit. Naruto, Tenten cried out as she was already on the verge of climax. Naruto ignored her and ran his tongue around her lips before he slowly pushed his tongue in. Tenten dropped her head back with a throaty echoing moan as she hit her first climax. Naruto moved, putting her legs over his shoulders as he started to lick her more. Tenten's hands gripped the sheets as her body reacted in kind to Naruto's touch. She was already covered in sweat, her back still arched and her toes still curled. The only thing she could do was moan and beg for more. But hell, of course he'd be good at pleasuring a woman. If he couldn't pleasure one, he would have gotten the ones he had, excluding Hinata. Naruto, Tenten cried out again, feeling his hands on her mounds, toying with her briefs as his tongue ran in and out of her ussy. Oh Kami, eat me, she cried out. Naruto chose to say nothing and continued to work his tongue. Tenten's eyes widened as she neared her second climax. Oh Kami, too soon, I'm gonna, oh Kami. Tenten cried out as she smashed through her second climax. Naruto slowly removed his tongue from her as he licked his lips. Yup, diffidently a good taste, Naruto smiled. 13. Tenten panted out. Oh, Naruto grinned, knowing what she meant. Please, put it in me, Tenten begged. Naruto nodded and freed his COC. He grinned when he saw her eyes widen. She simply mouthed, big, upon seeing it. Don't worry, you're plenty wet and I'll make sure to lube myself up good before entering, Naruto said as he started to rub his COC over her entrance. Tenten's body trembled as she felt his COC rubbing over her entrance. I can't wait much longer, Tenten moaned. Just about ready, Naruto replied as he pushed his head against her entrance a few times. Tenten dropped her head back and moaned lightly, feeling the tip of his COC push at her entrance. Naruto slowly pushed himself into her. He clenched his fist and stopped right away. What's wrong? Tenten asked. Tight. So ucking tight, Naruto groaned. Her PSSY felt like a velvet vice and it was awesome but just too damn tight. Ah, Tenten yelped lightly as Naruto sunk another inch into her. You're so big. Naruto leaned over her, kissed her lightly as his hands ran over her breast. He waited until she was moaning once again before he pushed into her more. Damn Tenten, you're going to rip my dick off, Naruto groaned as he finally managed to sink half his COC into her puss. Can't help it, Tenten moaned as she tried to relax so Naruto could push further into her. Naruto took a slow breath then looked at Tenten. She gave a nod knowing what he was asking her. Brace yourself, Naruto said. Tenten gripped the sheets and Naruto pressed his lips against her. As they kissed, Naruto rammed himself into her, completely sheathing himself inside of her. Tenten screamed into their kiss. Her hands left the bed and hooked onto Naruto's back. She felt like she had been split in half. Her nails dug into his back as she tried to alleviate the pain. Naruto groaned into their kiss as he felt her nails cutting into his back. That hurt a lot, Tenten said, slowly regaining her breath. Tell me about it. You're beyond tight and now my back's bleeding, Naruto said. Sorry. You can move, it doesn't hurt as much anymore, Tenten said with a blush. Naruto nodded and slowly started to move. Slowly the yelps and gasps of pain for the two died off and pleasure took its place. Tenten's body started to react to his actions. Her back started to arc and her nails dug into his back once again. Oh Kami, don't stop, Tenten begged as she reached another climax. Naruto groaned as he started to pump faster, finally feeling her body adjusted to his size. Shit, so tight I can't hold back, Naruto groaned as he clenched his fists and emptied himself into Tenten. His seed filled her and earned him her loudest moan yet as her eyes rolled back as the euphoric waves washed over her. Naruto fell to her side panting heavily as he laid next to her. Oh Kami, that was amazing, Tenten said as she panted heavily. Naruto simply smiled and pulled her into his arms. If you're really my 13th then you'll need to pack so you can move in with me, Naruto said as he kissed her cheek. Isn't that what shadow clones are for? Tenten asked as she pushed him onto his back and mounted him. They pack we fuck, she added. Sound good to me, Naruto said as he grabbed her HPS and the two started up again. Naruto groaned slightly, feeling what felt like a velvet vice clamping down on his manhood. As tight as it also felt undesirability good. He cracked open his eyes to see brown hair and one very sweaty body bouncing on his COC. Good morning Tenten, Naruto said as he placed his hands on her IPS. Naruto, oh god, Tenten gasped seeing Naruto was awake. Tenten placed her hands onto his chest as she rode him. She had become completely lost in her desire, she couldn't stop her HPS even if she wanted to. Her hair was out of its signature buns and stuck to her sweat-covered body. Her perfectly proportioned breasts bounced each time she drove down on him. This is one hell of a way to wake up, Naruto said as he started to thrust, matching his movements with Tenten's. Their bodies moved in perfect unison as Tenten's nails started to drag across Naruto's chest. Faster, Tenten moaned lightly and getting a nod from Naruto. He tightened his grip on her IPS and started to increase his pace. Tenten's moans started to echo out more and more. Naruto, was all Tenten was able to say before she crashed through her first climax. Her head flew back as she echoed out her climax, nearly screaming at the top of her lungs. Naruto let a sly grin slide over his face, then quickly flipped Tenten over so she was pinned under him. His lips attacked her neck as his HPS started to move again. Tenten hooked her arms onto Naruto's back, raking her nails down as she screamed in ecstasy. Naruto ran a hand up her body until it cupped one of her breasts. His lips moved down to her free breas and locked onto her stiffened nip. Fuck, Tenten, Naruto grunted suddenly as he emptied himself into her. Tenten's back arched upwards as her eyes rolled back. She was completely lost in the throes of their passion. Naruto panted and blinked a few times. He hadn't even felt his limit coming. He slowly pushed up, seeing Tenten had drifted off into a pleasure-induced sleep. Naruto leaned against a wall, his heart pounding. He loved his girls, but this was getting a tad extreme. He looked down at Hinata, who was currently sussing him off. In public, sure, he had taken Kuretsuchi at the cage's summit, but he knew they wouldn't get caught. Anybody could come across them here. For fuck's sake, they were 2 blocks from Ichiraku's. Hinata. Naruto grunted as he felt her head pick up speed once more. He was starting to lose control of his body. He quickly ran his hands into her hair, tangling his fingers as he did. Hinata moaned lightly as she ran one of her hands down her own body, trying to speed up her release in Naruto's. Her moaning started to echo, causing Naruto to look around, praying nobody noticed them. He dropped his head back, seeing nobody had noticed them, or at least didn't care. He grunted lightly and let his limit hit. Hinata's eyes went wide as she felt Naruto's seed pump into her mouth. She was in her heaven, gulping down rope after rope of Naruto's seed. Naruto, I love your taste, Hinata said as she gulped down the last mouthful of cum. Get up. Turn around. Drop your pants, Naruto commanded, his COC still throbbing. Hinata giggled and obeyed. She stood, turned around, and dropped her pants. She placed her hands on the wall of the building, awaiting her lover's COC. She didn't have to wait more than an instant for Naruto to grab her HPS and slam home into her. Hinata's eyes rolled back as the pleasure rushed her system. Naruto groaned loudly as he started his slow, passionate thrusts. Hinata's back arched and her body trembled in pleasure. Her nails raked across the wall as she fought with all her might not to scream. Naruto, on the other hand, was all moans and grunts. He was lost in his ecstasy and was started to move faster and harder. Hinata couldn't hold her voice man anymore and let a deep moan escape her lips. Oh Naruto! Hinata nearly screamed as she hit her first climax. This in turn pushed Naruto over. He couldn't contain his lust anymore and started slam into Hinata's core. And she loved every second of it. Her body was coated in a fine sheen of sweat and her eyes were rolling back in as she drifted in her euphoric pleasure. Hinata! Naruto growled lowly as he gripped her HPS tighter and plowed into her with all of his might. His hands started to glow for a moment, causing Hinata to freeze. She couldn't place it, but it felt like a barrier was being torn off her. What was that? Hinata managed to ask as she looked over her shoulder to see Naruto still growling lightly. Before he answered, he slammed home once more and filled her with his seed. Just a little surprise, Naruto said as his eyes shone through red but were slowly fading back to their usual blue. What kind of a surprise? Hinata asked. I used the Kyuubi's chakra to cleanse your body and remove the contraceptives I've had you taking, Naruto explained. You what? But Naruto, that mean? Hinata started to speak before he silenced her with a kiss. I want you to, Naruto said, pulling back as Hinata slumped slightly. I love you, Naruto, Hinata nearly shouted as she wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him deeply. Naruto ran his arms around her waist and pulled her against himself. The two froze when they heard a group of voices moving towards them. Naruto moved as fast as he could to redress and look somewhat presentable. Hinata, on the other hand, simply redressed, not caring if someone saw her upheaval look. The couple stepped out into the road and right into the path of Kiba, Shikamaru, Choji and Shino. Hey guys, Naruto said as he rubbed the back of his head. What were you doing in that alley? Choji asked. Do you really want that answer? Naruto asked. Not really, no, Choji replied. Well, catch you later, Naruto said as he took off with Hinata at his side. His back was planted to a wall as his eyes were locked on a pair of lust-filled teal eyes. He watched as her body slowly moved down his body. A sly, lustful smile adorned her face. Naruto licked his lips as he watched the sandy blonde undo his belt and unzipped his pants. So big, she spoke when his member was freed from its confines. Just as Naruto had done, she licked her lips and rather happily started to work on his COC head. Her tongue flicked over his head a few times before she worked her way down his shaft, licking and kissing at it like it was a lollipop. Damn Tamari. Don't stop, Naruto moaned lightly, feeling her rather skilled tongue working over him. He gasped slightly when he felt her hand start caressing his balls. He groaned loudly, feeling her mouth engulf the head of his throbbing COC and slowly started to suck down the shaft. Her head started to bob once she took as much of his COC as she could. Naruto ran his hands into her hair, entangling his fingers as he did. He started to groan more and louder as she picked up her pace and gave more attention to his balls. Temari's free hand moved down her own body, stopping on her brie to tease her stiffened nip. Her subsequently moans from teasing herself causing Naruto's head to loll back in a loud pleasure-filled moan to escape his lips. Temari was proud that she could make him so vocal with her body. Sure, the other girls could do it too, but she had never seen herself as that attractive. So Naruto having no control over his voice when she did it really boosted her ego. Temari, I'm going to blow, Naruto said as he tried to hold back. Temari's needs skyrocketed hearing that. She started to suck harder and faster, desperate for his cum to shoot into her mouth and down her throat. Her desire was sated when Naruto moaned loudly and his COC burst into her mouth. She happily gulped down all his seed as he shot rope after rope of hot thick cum into her mouth. She was on cloud 9 at the moment. Naruto on the other hand was overcome with lust. He wanted Temari and damn it all he would have her. Before Temari could fully realize what was happening, she was pinned down on her bed and Naruto was moved down between her legs. Temari bit her lip as she watched him slowly moving his way down her body. He kissed over her neck, bras, stomach, down her legs and back up before he reached her womanhood. Naruto, Temari moaned softly as his hot breath hit her soaked ussy. Their eyes met for a moment before his tongue slid out and ran over her folds. That in which caused her eyes to screw shut and she moaned loudly and her back arched upwards. Her legs wrapped around his head as he pushed his tongue against her entrance but didn't enter. Temari moaned again as he once more pushed at her entrance but didn't enter. Her need and lust were running rampant at this point. She needed him so badly it physically hurt to go without. Naruto, please, Temari screamed out. Naruto finally obeyed her and his tongue pushed into her aching core. She moaned loudly as his tongue started to move around inside of her walls. Her back arched with each flick of her CIT and her nails nearly tore into the sheets. Yes, scream my name, Naruto grinned as he returned to her folds. His tongue pushed into her ussy against at the same time as his hands moved their way up her body to tease her brias. Temari's moans started to echo out more, feeling his hands caressing her brias as his tongue delved into her folds. Naruto, Temari screamed out, feeling his tongue push her to the brink of her climax. Naruto grinned as he gave her nippus a light pull right as he flicked his tongue over her CIT. The combined shock threw her over the edge of her climax. Temari's voice vanished as she climaxed, her back arched more than ever, her toes curled and her nails tore through the sheets. Naruto chuckled lightly watching her body writhe in her ecstasy. Her body went limp after a few moments as she came down from her euphoric high. Her teal eyes looked up to see Naruto over her and his manhood rubbing at her sensitive entrance. Take me, Temari begged softly. Naruto leaned down, locking their lips together. Both of them could taste the remnants of each other on their lips. Their tongues started to fight for supremacy the moment they touched. Temari moaned into the kiss as she felt Naruto's COC push into her core. His thickness stretched her to a near painful extent. Damn Temari, you're so fucking tight, Naruto groaned as he pushed further in. Temari could only moan in response. She was lost in their euphoric vulgarity. Naruto pushed up slightly and grabbed onto Temari's legs. He spread her open more, then gave her one more kiss before he started his thrusting. Her moans were instantaneous and they echoed through the entire clan home. Harder Naruto, please harder, Temari begged. Her need for Naruto had completely overtaken her senses and desires. Nothing else would ever matter more than him. Said Blonde obeyed and picked up his thrusts, so he was slamming into her with everything he had. Temari's moans turned into screams of ecstasy. She tried her best to push back each time he slammed into her. Naruto leaned in once more and locked his lips onto her neck, starting to trail kissing along her neck, chin and collar. Oh Naruto, Temari screamed out as she tore through her second climax. She wasn't given time to fully enjoy the sensation as Naruto continued to pound into her. He had reached the point where his need for release surpassed his desires to make her squirm and moan. Fuck Temari, I'm going to cum, Naruto groaned out as he burst into her, filling her walls with his seed. Temari threw her head back and let out her loudest ecstasy-filled scream, feeling her love seed pumping into her welcoming womb. Oh god Naruto, you always cum so much, Temari said as she tried to control her panting. Naruto grinned down at her. Roll over and get on your hands and knees, he commanded. A foxy grin slid over his face as he watched Temari happily roll over and get onto her hands and knees. Fuck me hard. I love it when you pound me so, Temari said as she shook her ass. Naruto didn't need a more blatant offer. He got behind her, lined up, and sunk himself back into her welcoming folds. He grabbed her IPS and his pounding started once more. Temari's eyes widened when she saw the door was wide open and Sakura, Ino, Karui and Anko were all watching her get fucked like a bitch in heat. Enjoy the show, ladies, Naruto said as his thrusting picked up. Temari's eyes rolled back, feeling her walls stretching and squeezing Naruto's COC. Her body was beyond desperate for him. I want it, Sakura said as she tried to enter the room. But a deadly glare from Temari stopped her dead. Temari was willing to share Naruto with the other, but when it came to sex she would not allow anyone else to be in her bed. Naruto just chuckled, then looked to Karui. He gave her one look and nodded his head to the side. She took the hint and dragged Sakura away to give her some attention. Ino bit her lip as she watched Temari's body squirming in pure ecstasy. Naruto more. Temari cried out as she pushed back against his thrusts, causing the sound of their bodies colliding to start echoing out. Naruto tightened his grip on her IPS slightly as he took his thrusts into overdrive. Fuck Temari. Here it comes again, Naruto moaned loudly as he reached him limit once more and burst into Temari's folds again. Temari let out another loud scream as she hit another climax herself. Her arms gave out right then and she fell forward onto the bed, her as in the air with Naruto still sheathed inside of her folds. Temari, that was amazing, Naruto said as he pulled out and watched her body slump. He chuckled lightly seeing she had passed out and happy smile on her face. He leaned in and kissed her cheek softly before he covered her and left. Two figures sat next to each other in the soothing waters of the Uzumaki Namikaze hot springs. The first had shoulder-length purple hair and light brown eyes. The other had long black hair and deep crimson eyes. Both were stark gnawed and cuddling lightly in the water. I love doing this, Anko spoke as her arms tightened lightly around Kurenai. So do I, Kurenai replied with a light kiss to Anko's cheek. Anko licked her lips as her hands slowly moved down Kurenai's body. Well, it's this SXY as hell. The two women looked to see Naruto standing in the doorway clad only in a towel. Naruto, they spoke in unison, both wanted him the instant they saw him. Here I decided to take a light soak and I come to find you two fooling around, Naruto smiled. Why don't you join us, Naruto? Kurenai asked. Yeah, hop in, Naruto, Anko added. I don't see why not, Naruto said as he threw off him towel and entered the waters. Anko moved to his right side while Kurenai took his left. Anko didn't hesitate to run a hand up his leg aiming for his manhood. Kurenai on the other hand was much more devious. She had already lowered her head to his throbbing COC. Nai-chan, you cheater, Anko growled, copying her friend and moving to suck off Naruto. Hey, I didn't say I was here to fuck you too, Naruto said. The two stopped and looked up at him with sad eyes. Both of them put everything they had into their puppy dog eyes trying to convince him. Naruto simply smiled, rolled his eyes. Now how can I resist when you give me the double puppy dog eyes? Again both smiled and returned to their work. Anko took the base and balls while Kurenai focused on the tip and shaft. Naruto gave a groan, feeling their mouths starting to work. Mover his COK. So good, Kurenai moaned onto his COC, her head starting to bob as she engulfed his COC. You better share, Anko growled before she returned to lick at Naruto's shaft. Anko, there's plenty to go around, Naruto laughed lightly as he ran a hand into their hair. Kurenai seemed oblivious to his actions as her need and desire for Naruto's thick seed started to overplay her other thoughts. Naruto grinned as he watched his personal MILF work his COC with Gutso. Geez, Nai-chan, you're such a whore, Anko joked. It's just so good, Kurenai pulled off just long enough to speak before returning to her lover's COC. Anko finally had enough and pulled Kurenai back. Time to share, Anko said as she wrapped her lips around his head. Kurenai didn't seem to argue and moved to suck and kiss Naruto's shaft. Naruto groaned lightly, both of them working him was pushing him towards his limit at an alarming rate. He entangled his fingers into the two women's hair slightly more before he finally pulled them both off and freed his hand to stroke himself. Close your eyes and open your mouths, Naruto commanded as he started to beat himself. The two women smiled and opened their mouths as wide as they could and even stuck out their tongues. Naruto groaned again as he hit his limit and shot his seat onto their faces. He made sure to give them both a few good shots before he rubbed his COC against their faces a few times. The two turned to each other and rather happily licked each other clean. Neither left a spot of cum on the other. Anko was the first to react once they were fully cleaned. Naruto, Anko spoke as she turned around and offered herself up. Please fuck me, she begged. No me, Kurenai spoke taking the same position as Anko. I think Anko asked for it first, Naruto said as he moved behind Anko and sunk himself into her welcoming folds. Not to leave out Kurenai, Naruto ran one of his hands over hers then slid two fingers into her ussy. Naruto, the two moaned out in unison. Naruto chuckled and started to move his HPS and fingers. Anko obviously became the more vocal of the two. She nearly screamed as Naruto took her as hard as he did. Kurenai inched closer to Anko, getting her to look at her. Once their eyes met, they both knew what they wanted. Damn, that's hot, Naruto said as he watched Anko and Kurenai starting to kiss. Kurenai dominated the kiss since Anko could hardly keep up thanks to Naruto's COC slamming into her. Faster, oh please faster, Anko moaned out, getting a grin and a nod from Naruto. He picked up his pace to the maximum and fucked her as fast as he could. Naruto, I can't wait much longer, Kurenai begged as she shook her ass. Naruto rolled his eyes, still moving his fingers inside of her. Coming, Anko cried out as she slammed through her first climax. Kurenai bit her lip and shook her as lightly trying to tantalize Naruto, and tantalize him she did. Naruto moved behind Kurenai, his throbbing COC rubbing between her legs. Take me, Naruto, Kurenai begged as she shook her as for him to further tantalize him. Naruto didn't even need that encouragement. Without a second thought, he buried himself into Kurenai's welcoming folds. Kurenai, Naruto groaned out as he started to build his thrusts. Kurenai only moaned in response as her back arched and her eyes lolled back from the pleasure. No fair, you're forgetting about me, Anko whined. I'd never, Naruto replied, beckoning Anko to him. She happily moved to him, letting their lips lock together. Naruto's tongue delved into Anko's mouth, battling with hers for several minutes as he kept his thrusts going. Kurenai could hardly register the makeout session literally happening behind her back as she moaned over and over. Thanks to her moaning, an evil notion formed in Anko's mind. Geez, Nai-chan, what would Liluruzan say if he saw this? Anko asked with an evil smile. Kurenai's eyes widened in fear as she looked around to make sure her son was nowhere nearby. No worries, Kurenai. Konohamaru is babysitting Hiruzen Jr., remember? Naruto said, calming the red-eyed woman. Ah, spoil sport, Anko said as the two returned to their lustful makeout and Naruto renewed his thrusting. Harder, Naruto. Harder please, Kurenai moaned out as she held onto the side of the hot spring trying to control her body. Naruto happily obliged her as started to slam harder into his genjutsu using lover. Anko left Naruto's lips moving down to Kurenai's body. She started to lick and kiss at her, Nai-chan's, neck and shoulders. Damn, the second her lips touched you, your body clamped down. You're enjoying this a little too much, Naruto commented. Coming, Kurenai moaned out as her walls clamped down with all their might as she hit her climax. Naruto slammed into her with one final hard thrust and let himself burst as well. With a heavy happy sigh, Kurenai sunk down into the water, only supported by Anko and Naruto. I think you broke her, Anko joked as Kurenai lulled off into a rather peaceful nap. Maybe a little. How about you take her to her room, or yours, whichever you please, Naruto said with a smile. Will do. Going to see Karui? Anko asked. I promised I'd visit Ayame during her lunch break, Naruto said as he gave Anko another kiss, then left the hot spring. Naruto's eyes locked on Ayame as she took out a bag of garbage. He had overheard her and the other girls talking about their fantasies. Sakura wanted a shadow clone gangbang, Karui wanted dress up as a slave girl, Hinata wanted to do it in her father's office just to piss him off, Anko wanted to do it with him and Kurenai, while Kurenai wanted the same, but Ayame's fantasy was what caught him by the biggest surprise. Rape of all things for her to have a fantasy about, she openly admitted to the other girls that she wanted to act out a rape fantasy with Naruto. Hearing this, he decided to give his ramen goddess what she wanted the most, him raping her in a back alley. Before she could react, he dropped down and grabbed her. She was about to scream, but he got a gag into her mouth before she could. Ayame's mind was going through way too many scenarios. 1. She was being kidnapped to hurt Naruto. 2. Someone was simply trying to take advantage of her. 3. Also her biggest wish, it was Naruto whom was trying to act out her fantasy. Then she felt a rough and calloused hand start moving around her form. Her heart started to pound in her chest as she felt the hand reached her breast. She screamed into the gag in her mouth, trying to call for help. "Silence, woman," Naruto said gruffly into her ear, making her scream die in her throat. It was Naruto. She knew that voice anywhere. Her mind finally put 2 and 2 together and figured out that Naruto had found out her Seoul fantasy and was going to act it out for her. Giving into the moment, she started to fight back with everything she had. But Naruto easily overpowered her. His voice once again spoke. "Keep fighting, it makes me hard," Naruto said as his hand moved from her breast to her waist. Ayame tried to fight back even more at this point. As bad as it was to say, she was having the time of her life fighting against Naruto. "I'm going to make you love it, every single inch," Naruto growled as his hand slid into her shorts and under her panties. Ayame struggled more and more as she felt his hand moving towards her core. She tried to scream into her gag once she felt his hand run over her womanhood. "Well, you are turned on by this, you're nice and wet after all," Naruto said as Ayame finally broke free and spun around to see Naruto dressed in a pair of dark pants and a black hoodie. His face was adorned with a sadistic smile. Ayame shook her head no as Naruto pinned her to the wall and slid in hand back down into her panties. Naruto pulled his hand back out to show her how wet she was. "See, you're just a slew who gets off by being raped," Naruto growled as he grabbed her shirt and forced it open, nearly snapping off the buttons. She could tell he was refraining from destroying her cloths. Or at least she thought that until he pulled out a kunai and slashed off her apron and shorts. Ayame looked up, doing her best to make some crocodile tears to sell her fear of the coming abuse. Naruto licked her cheek, tasting the fake tears. He could tell with how hard her heart was pounding and how wet she was that she was on cloud 9. "If you promise to be a good girl, I won't turn this on you," Naruto said as he pointed the kunai at her neck. Ayame trembled, then nodded, conceding to her rapist's command. "Good, now don't scream," Naruto said as he took out the gag. After a few gasps for breath, Ayame finally spoke. "What do you want?" Ayame continued to tremble lightly, which was hard because of how much she loved this moment. "First off, you're going to UCK it, then I'm going to UCK, that's tight as of yours," Naruto said, still wearing his sadistic smile as he undid his pants and pulled out his throbbing COC. "Gross, I won't put that in my mouth," Ayame said as she tried to pull back. "You will or you die," Naruto said as he spun the kunai in his hand. Ayame gave in and nodded before she lowered her head and slowly moved forward. Naruto tapped his foot impatiently as he waited for Ayame to start working on him. Ayame slowly wrapped her hand around Naruto's COC, starting to stroke him. She slowly looks up to see him glaring down, waiting for her to start sousing. With one final wince, she moved forward and starts to suck the head of his COC. "Oh no, how am I going to keep up my fearful state? His COC tastes so good," Ayame thought as she started to suck her blonde master's COC. She tried her best not to fall into her lust. She failed. "I see you are just a whore that gets off from being raped," Naruto said as he watched Ayame's sousing starting to pick up pace as she sunk into the moment. The taste of his COCLK was too much for her, she couldn't keep the facade going. Naruto, on the other hand, kept in character and started to force his COK further down her throat. Ayame's eyes widened when she felt his manhood shoved down into her throat. She hit at his thigh, trying to tell him she was choking on his manhood. "Yeah, that's it, choke on my fat COC," Naruto said as he pumped himself into her throat a few more times, then pulled off, letting her gasp for air. "Please, I'll suck it, just be gentle," Ayame pleaded, surprising Naruto that she got back in character so quickly. "Then suck it, whore," Naruto said as he smacked his COC against her face. Ayame wrapped her lips around his COC once more and started to suck on it with all her might. Naruto groaned loudly as he felt his COC hitting the back of her throat over and over. Here it comes, drink it all, Naruto commanded as he let his limit hit and erupted into Ayame's throat. Naruto slid his hands into Ayame's hair, stopping her from pulling off as he blew his load into her mouth. Ayame moaned, feeling his seed spraying into her mouth. Her eyes rolled back slightly, feeling wave after wave of cum flowing into her mouth and down her throat. Once his load finally stopped, Naruto slowly pulled his still hard coc out of Ayame's abused mouth. Now be a good girl and show me that is, Naruto commanded. Ayame backed away from him, shaking her head. No please, I'll suck it again, please don't, Ayame said as she found a bottle and hurled it at Naruto. He easily caught it and tossed it behind him and into a garbage can. He took a single step towards her and watched as she still scrambled away from him. She turned onto her hands and knees to crawl away, but that only served to motivate Naruto to move. Good girl, Naruto said as he grabbed her HPS. Please don't, I've never, Ayame said as she tried to break free from his grasp. Don't worry, it only hurts a lot, Naruto said as he sunk his spit and cum-stained coc into Ayame's ass. Ah, Ayame cried out from the sudden penetration. Her nails dug into the ground as Naruto quickly started to pound into her ass. Yeah, take it all, Naruto said as he slammed the entirety of his manhood into her with each thrust. Ayame fought to hold back her moans and tried with all her might to stay in character. Naruto could see this and leaned over her. It's fine, we can break if you want, Naruto whispered. Oh god, you ck me harder. Ayame nearly screamed out. That's my kinky girl, Naruto said as he slid his hands from her HPS to her brias and started to pound harder. Ayame, what's taking so long? Tyuki's voice echoed out. Sorry dad, just talking to a friend, I'll be in a minute, Ayame said as she held back her moans the best she could. Just wondering, take your time honey, Tyuki replied. You got so much tighter thinking your father would find us, you really are a kinky girl, Naruto said as he moved his HPS more and more. It's just so good, Ayame moaned out as her eyes rolled back. Naruto chuckled lightly and kissed at her neck as he built up his thrusts to their maximum. Ayame, your SS is too damn good, I'm going to cum, Naruto said as his thrusts became erratic and brutal. Just a little more, OUCK just about, Ayame moaned out as she pushed back against his thrusts. Shit, here it comes, Naruto nearly shouted as he burst into Ayame's ass. His seed sprayed deep into her, causing her to reach her orgasm. Her body completely seized as she plowed into her euphoric release. The two sat in their unified climax for a few minutes before they finally pulled apart. Ayame looked to her shredded cloths, then to Naruto. He simply smiled and pulled out a bag with an exact copy of her cloths. God, I love you so much, Ayame said as she took the bag and started to dress. Naruto nodded and dressed as well. And you, my goddess, Naruto kissed Ayame's cheek before he vanished in a yellow flash. A young red-haired woman laid on her bed. She held a book over her face, reading out of boredom. Her amber eyes slowly moved over the pages, but her mind was miles away. She kept reliving the night she first laid with Naruto. He was prefect. A slow, contented sigh escaped her lips as she remembered the night. I hope you're thinking about me, a voice said, catching her attention. She snapped her book closed and looked up to see Naruto standing in her doorway, a sly grin plastered over his face. I was actually, Karui replied with a light smile. Were they good thought? Naruto asked as he stepped in and closed the door. Oh yeah, very good, Karui replied as she licked her lips. Let's see if I can live up to them, Naruto said as he crawled onto the bed. Karui spread her legs as he moved up between them. I bet you can, Karui replied as she watched Naruto stop as her knees. With another sly grin, he slid his hands up her legs until they reached her waist. Karui lifted her IPS, letting him pull off the skirt she was wearing. An instant later and her skirt was gone. Naruto stopped and a wicked grin came to his face. Uzumaki panties, I didn't know they made those, Naruto said as he saw the red swirl on the front of her white panties. They don't, I kinda made them, Karui said with a heavy blush. You know what they say about making a dark girl blush, Naruto grinned. I assume you're going to make me do more than just blush, Karui said as she watched Naruto lower himself. Blush, moan, squeal, scream, squirm, arch, and all those familiar contortions and sounds, Naruto said as he blew lightly over Karui's panties, making her gasp. "Oh Kami," Karui said as Naruto removed her panties. He didn't hesitate to lower his head and start licking at her core. Karui dropped back with a moan as his tongue ran up her lips. Naruto grinned and moved his hand along her legs. He lightly groped at her body as his tongue delved into her folds. Karui's moans started to echo more as she felt Naruto's tongue moving around inside of her. "Come on, scream and moan for me," Naruto said as he pulled back his tongue and slid a finger into her womanhood. Karui more than happily obeyed and let out a long loud moan. Naruto gave a sly grin and returned his tongue to her lips, focusing his skillful tongue on her clit. "Oh Kami," Karui nearly screamed as a second finger slid into her while his tongue continued to tease her lips and clit. Naruto redoubled his efforts, hearing her moans echoing more and more. He wanted to make her scream out his name. His tongue pushed into her folds once more and his fingers slid out and move up her body. Karui gasped lightly, feeling Naruto's hands slid under her shirt and into her br. Another loud moan echoed from her mouth as Naruto tweaked her nipples right as he flicked his tongue over her clt. "Naruto!" Karui screamed out as she hit her first climax and plowed through it a second later. Naruto chuckled lightly and started to kiss his way up Karui's body. She groaned lightly when she came face to face with him and felt his steely cock against her thigh. "I love your chocolate skin," Naruto said as he kissed at her neck a few times. Karui moaned again and hooked her arms under his arms. "Please take me, I can't wait any longer," Karui said lustfully. "As you wish," Naruto said, and with one thrust he buried himself inside of her. Karui's back quickly arched up as she screamed out in ecstasy. Naruto didn't give her a second reprieve and started to pound into her with reckless abandon. And Karui loved every second of it. Her back arched more as her toes curled and her nails dug into Naruto's back. Naruto balled his fist and ignored her nails digging into his back as he continued to pump into her. Karui's body squirmed under his constant pumping. "Oh Naruto! Harder!" Karui cried out. Naruto happily obeyed and put his thrusting into full gear. Karui's moans started to echo out more and more with each thrust. Her body continued to arch and move with each of Naruto's hard thrusts. Every single time he slammed into her, she would damn near hit a climax. "Damn Karui, you're squeezing me so tightly," Naruto groaned as he felt her walls coiling around him so tightly he thought he'd burst. "Don't hold back, I wanna feel you," Karui begged as she hooked her legs around his waist, pleading for him to fill her. "You get your wish," Naruto replied as he burst into her. Karui let out her loudest ecstasy-filled scream as the euphoric feeling of Naruto's seed spraying into her entered her system. Naruto leaned in and kissed at Karui's neck a few more times before he started to move again. Karui's eyes went wide, feeling his cock starting to move again. She was more than sated, but Naruto obviously was not. And she was not about to stop something that felt this good. "Nah, Naruto, don't stop," Karui moaned lightly. Naruto grinned. He had no intention of stopping yet. Naruto continued to kiss at her neck as he started to build up his thrusts once more. "You just love this, don't you?" Naruto asked as he pulled Karui up onto his lap. She started to bounce the moment he had her situated. Naruto buried his face into her breast, licking at her nipples. Karui wrapped her arms around Naruto's neck as he started to thrust up more and more. "Ah yes," Karui screamed out as she bounced on his lap. Her red hair flew around as she rode her blonde-haired lover. Naruto groaned lightly, feeling his second release fast coming. He ran a hand up her back and entangled it into her hair as the two pressed their lips together again. Their tongues quickly started to fight for supremacy, neither willing to give out to the other. "Here it comes," Naruto said as he pounded up into his red-headed lover. Karui threw her head back and let her loudest ecstasy-filled moan echo from her as she hit her climax just as Naruto emptied himself into her. The two stayed connected for several minutes, panting heavily. Karui looked to see Naruto smiling happily as he looked over her. She placed some of her weight against him and pushed him down onto the bed. Naruto continued to smile as they now laid together, his manhood still buried inside of her. "So when do I get to have a kid?" Karui asked. "You want one?" Naruto asked. Karui simply nodded and smiled. Well, I promised Hinata gets to have the first planned one, Naruto said. Planned one? Karui asked. Well, I wasn't too safe when I had my fun with Mei, so there's a chance she already could be, Naruto chuckled. I forgot you have her too, Karui said as she rolled off to Naruto's side and curled up. I'm going to take a nap now, she added and quickly sunk into a peaceful sleep. You do that, I have to see a certain former Iwa Kunoichi about a snake and a drain, Naruto said as he rolled out of the bed. That has to be the dumbest thing I've ever heard, Kurama's voice echoed out. Well, I haven't heard from you for a while, Naruto laughed. I decided to take a nap, Kurama replied. Was it that bad? Naruto asked. No, bad would be an upgrade, Kurama chuckled. Oh, shut up, Naruto replied. Just go and plow your rock, girl. Kurama now laughed loudly. With your snake? Seriously, it would have been better if you were going to Anko, then at least the snake line would have held some point, Kurama added while still laughing. Naruto stood in the doorway of his kitchen, his eyes locked on a woman's SS as she cleaned up the dishes from her lunch. He licked his lips lightly, seeing her perfect SS and wonderful legs. Her IPS started to shake lightly, making Naruto think she knew he was there. Instead, he heard her starting to sing. Now he had to hold back his laugh as he watched her sing and dance while she cleaned dishes. Naruto moved forward slowly, his manhood painfully straining in his pants. Boo! Naruto whispered into Kuretsuchi's ear, making her yelp. Naruto. She flicked him on the nose. Don't do that, you scared me halfway to Iowa, she added. Only half, I'll have to get better at that then, Naruto laughed. Naruto, can we do it here? Kuretsuchi asked. Naruto couldn't hide his grin as she asked him. How can I say no to you? Naruto asked as he slid a hand in between her legs. Kuretsuchi leaned back into Naruto's chest as his hands started to explore her body. Her back pushed against his chest and her eyes grinded against his restrained manhood. I want it, now, Kuretsuchi said lustfully. Then you'll have it, Naruto said as he slid a hand along the hem of her pants and forced them down. Kuretsuchi giggled lightly and leaned forward and shook her as lightly for Naruto as he removed her pants. His hands groped at her as a few times before he finally removed his COC from his pants and lined himself up with her entrance. Take me, Kuretsuchi commanded. Naruto chuckled lightly and pushed into her folds. A lusty groan escaped her lips as Naruto sunk into her. He leaned over her, kissing at her shoulders and neck as she adjusted to his girth. So big, Kuretsuchi moaned lightly. Naruto ran his hands into her shirt, making him smile. No breh? Naruto asked. Useless, I'd go around nod if we didn't have a 3-year-old living here, Kuretsuchi said as she pushed back against Naruto, enticing him into starting his thrusts. Kuretsuchi arched backwards as Naruto started to move in and out of her at his agonizingly slow pace that allowed her to feel every inch that slid over her walls. Okami Naruto, please don't stop, Kuretsuchi moaned loudly, feeling his length sliding in and out, pushing her towards the edge of her first orgasm. She yelped lightly, feeling Naruto tweak her nipples right as he hit home inside of her. I love your moans, Naruto said as he started to build up his thrusts. Kuretsuchi moaned louder as Naruto's COC moved into her faster. Her nails raked across the counter as she trembled in pleasure. Naruto leaned in more and ran his tongue along her ear before biting her earlobe lightly, gaining another moan from her. Naruto, I want to see you, Kuretsuchi moaned out. Naruto nodded and pulled out before he quickly flipped her onto her back and sunk back into her. Kuretsuchi quickly wrapped her arms around his neck and pulled him into a searing kiss. Her arms hooked around his neck and her legs ran along his. Naruto moved one hand into her hair while the other groped at hers and their tongues battled in their lusty game. Kuretsuchi arched her back, trying to push herself against Naruto more in hopes he would start to move harder. Her wishes were answered as he picked up his power and started to slam into her. Naruto couldn't help but laugh, mentally, at how just about all of his girls liked his rougher nowadays. Naruto slid his hand over Kuretsuchi's as and pushed a finger into her as, gaining a deep groan from her. I've never done it there, Kuretsuchi groaned. Do you want to? Naruto asked as he felt Kuretsuchi's walls suddenly constrict as she hit a climax. After she recomposed herself, she bit her lip and nodded. Be gentle, you're so damn big as it is, Kuretsuchi said. I'd never hurt you on purpose, my Kurokoi, Naruto said as he kissed her passionately. Once again Kuretsuchi rolled over, displaying her as for Naruto. Okay, I'm ready, she said as she braced herself. Naruto nodded and rubbed his COC against her rear entrance a few times, using her own juices to lube her up. He leaned in and kissed at her neck, trying to get her to relax as he pushed into her. To his surprise, Kuretsuchi moaned as he pushed into her rather than yelping or crying. He sunk just over half of his COC into her as before he finally heard her yelp. He waited until she gave a nod to push further in. Kuretsuchi moaned again as she felt his manhood filling her. Oh god, this feels good, Kuretsuchi moaned. You're such a kinky girl. Naruto laughed as he hit base and got another moan from the girl. Is that a bad thing? Kuretsuchi asked. No, it is not, Naruto said as he started to move, giving her little time to fully adjust. Kuretsuchi's eyes rolled back, giving her the fuck silly look as Naruto now pounded into her ass. Harder. Oh fuck my ass, Kuretsuchi pleaded, loving the feeling. Naruto laughed lightly and grabbed her IPS, getting ready to fuck her as hard as he could. Kuretsuchi looked over her shoulder and licked her lips, letting Naruto know she was loving every second of it. Your wish is my command, Naruto joked as he put all his force into pounding Kuretsuchi's ass. Oh fuck. Yes Kami, yes. Kuretsuchi screamed out in pleasure as Naruto pounded with everything he had. Ah, I'm coming. I'm coming. She screamed out again as she slammed through her climax in seconds. Fuck, I'm gonna blow, Naruto said. I want it on my face, Kuretsuchi said lustfully. Then get on your knees, Naruto said as he pulled out and started to jack himself as hard as he could. Kuretsuchi quickly obeyed and got on her knees and opened her mouth. Her eyes closed and her tongue out, awaiting Naruto's seed. Here it comes, Naruto said as he burst onto Kuretsuchi's face, covering her with thick spurts of cum. The first wave hit home in her mouth, while the second and third caught her forehead and cheeks. When he finally finished, he couldn't help but laugh, seeing Kuretsuchi's face coated in his seed. So thick, so good, Kuretsuchi moaned as she licked her lips and cleaned her face. Kami, you're so kinky, Naruto laughed as he looked down at Kuretsuchi. He gave a contented sigh and kissed her now clean forehead. Going so soon? Kuretsuchi asked. I have a meeting with the Hokage, Naruto said as he put his member away. Naruto walked into the Hokage's office to see Tsunade asleep in her chair and her desk surprisingly clean of work. He could see she had worked rather hard to finish her paperwork for the day. A soft smile graced his lips as he walked over to her. Suna-chan, wake up, Naruto whispered into her ear. His voice was soft and loving and coaxed Tsunade awake. Naruto, is that you? Tsunade asked as she rubbed her eyes sleepily. You did ask to see me, Naruto said, still smiling. Oh yeah, I forgot, Tsunade said as she yawned and cracked her neck. Naruto stood behind her and ran his hand over her shoulders, rubbing them slowly. Sit back and rest for a few, we can talk in a little bit, Naruto said as he started to massage her shoulders. That feels good, Naruto, Tsunade groaned, letting her head drop back, starting to drift off into another nap. Tsunade-sam, oh Naruto, Shizune stopped dead, seeing her blonde lover giving Tsunade a shoulder massage. Hey Shizune, would you mind getting Tsunade some tea? Naruto asked. Oh sure, I'll be back in a little bit, Shizune said before she quickly left. Did I hear Shizune? Tsunade asked. I sent her to get some tea, Naruto replied as he rubbed down her back, getting another groan from Tsunade. Naruto, Tsunade looked up at said blonde. Yes. Naruto smiled down. Could you massage my brias? They seem to ache a little, Tsunade said as innocently as she could. Naruto grinned and nodded before he ran his hand up her back and over her shoulders. Of course I will, Naruto replied as he started to grope his blonde-haired Hokage. His fingers rolled over her nipples, making Tsunade moan lightly. Naruto ran his hands over Tsunade's brias, reaching the edge of her gray kimono blouse. He leaned in and kissed at her neck lightly before he freed her brias from their confines. Don't stop, Tsunade moaned lightly. Naruto obeyed and continued to fondle her brias while kissing the nape of her neck. His fingers traced over her nipples once again as he lightly pulled at the stiffened nub in an attempt to coax another moan from her, and moan she did. Tsunade leaned back, let her head roll to the side, giving Naruto more access to her neck. You taste so damn good, Naruto said as he kissed and licked at Tsunade's neck. Damn it Naruto, I should be working, Tsunade said as she fought back her moans. Tell me to stop then, Naruto replied. I can't, it feels too damn good, Tsunade replied as her back arched from his attention. Then how about you spread those legs and let my hands work their magic, Naruto said. Tsunade nodded and spread her legs, letting Naruto snake a hand down her body and into her pants. A pleasure-filled groan rolled out of Tsunade's mouth as Naruto pushed a finger into her already wet core. Naruto, she looked to him with lust-filled eyes. Yes Suna-chan, Naruto asked with a grin. I want you, please, Tsunade said lustfully. Prove it, Naruto grinned. Before he could full realize what happened, he found himself in the Hokage's chair with his pants off and Tsunade's mouth wrapped around his COC head. He groaned, feeling her tongue running along his length, and she bobbed her head. Suna-chan, use those awesome tits of yours, Naruto said. Tsunade obeyed and sat up a little more, letting Naruto's COK land between her brias. She looked up at Naruto to see a happy smile on his face. Without a second thought, she started to stroke him with her brias, trying to milk him for everything he had. She was beyond horny, and this wasn't even close to enough for her. Tsunade leaned her head down, licking at the tip of his COC each time to poke out from her brias. Naruto moaned again as he felt himself building towards his first release. He looked down to see Tsunade working his member with her mouth and brias. He wasn't going to last very long with how hard she was working him. Shit Tsunade, slow down, Naruto said as he ran his hands into her hair. Tsunade ignored him and continued to stroke and lick at his COC. Naruto moaned out her name once more as he reached his limit and blew his load. Tsunade wrapped her lips around his COK just before he came and quickly started to gulp down his cum. Kami, I love the taste of your seed, Tsunade said as she licked her lips. Now for one of my favorite things, bend over the desk, Naruto commanded. Tsunade grinned and obeyed, bending over the desk so Naruto could take her. Naruto slid his fingers along the hem of her pants before he ripped them down, panties included. Kami, I can't wait any longer, please fuck me, Tsunade begged while shaking her as lightly. Oh, I plan to, Naruto said as he lined himself up and pushed in, filling her with his length. He quickly started to thrust into Tsunade, giving her what she wanted. Her moans started to echo louder and louder with each thrust. Naruto slid his hands along Tsunade's HPS and he pounded into her. His fingers danced along her skin as they slowly moved up her arching gnawed flesh. Once his hands found her brias once more, he let out a contented sigh and started to grope her again. Oh Kami, Naruto, Tsunade cried out as his fingers pinched and pulled her nipples, matching each thrust he gave her. Naruto leaned in, kissing at her shoulders and the nape of her neck once more. I love hearing you cry out my name, Naruto chuckled lightly as he pistoned into her again and again. The two froze when they heard the door open and a figure started to walk in. I got some. The figure was caught off guard seeing the Hokage bend over her desk with a bitch in heat look on her face. Hey Shizune, put the tea down and let Tsunade lick the ussy, Naruto said with a chuckle as he started to thrust into the blonde Hokage again. To Tsunade's surprise, she found herself wanting to eat Shizune out. She licked her lips as she watched Shizune close and lock the door. That sounds lovely, Shizune said as she disrobed, showing she wasn't wearing a thing but her robe and black high heels. Now that's a kinky way to dress, Naruto said as he watched Shizune walk over and grab Tsunade's head. You don't Shizune started to say before Tsunade answered by quickly sliding her tongue along Shinzu's lips. Said assistant moaned loudly when Tsunade's tongue pushed into her puss and her hands latched onto her ass. Fuck, this is hot to watch, Naruto said as he picked up his pace, starting to lose himself in the heat of their fucking. Her tongue feels so good, Shizune moaned loudly as her IPS bucked against Tsunade, trying to get more of her tongue inside of her. Tsunade was in a new form of heaven for herself. Naruto pounding her from behind while she tongue-ucked her assistant. Shizune ran her hands into Tsunade's hair, her nails lightly raking along her scalp. Fuck, I'm going to come again, Naruto said as he burst into Tsunade's welcoming womb. Tsunade let out her loudest moan yet, giving Shizune the last push she needed to obtain her first climax. Tsunade panted heavily on her desk as she rolled over to look up at the two people standing over her. Shizune, how about to get onto of Tsunade make out while I fuck you both, Naruto suggested with a wide grin. Neither woman thought for a second before Shizune did just that and climbed on top of her master. Tsunade ran her hand around Shizune's waist while the aforementioned Nin encircled her arms around Tsunade's neck. Their lips met an instant later and their tongues shortly after that. Naruto watched the display for a moment before he lined his still throbbing COC up with Shizune's soaked entrance and pushed in. Tsunade used the moan Shizune gave to claim her mouth and pushed her tongue in to explore her assistant's mouth. Shizune moaned into their kiss, feeling Naruto passionately thrusting in and out of her. Her body pressed against Tsunade's as their love-making became more frantic. Naruto's thrusts picked up once more as he again lost himself into their heat. Harder, Naruto! Shizune cried out, pushing her brias into Tsunade's face. Said blondes both took their prizes. Naruto started to fuck Shizune with everything he had while Tsunade latched her lips onto Shizune's nip and started to suck at them. Fuck, you two are milking me like pros, Naruto said, already feeling his thirst release approaching. Shizune moved her hands from Tsunade's neck to the desk and raked her nailed along the top as she smashed through her first climax. Her body was completely frozen as she rode the waves of her orgasm. Naruto, on the other hand, picked up his pace even more, now desperate to fill Shizune with him cum. Tsunade was completely oblivious to both of them as she continued to grope at Shizune's body while she soused on her brias. Naruto gave a loud groan as he found his third release and emptied himself into Shizune's folds. Naruto! Shizune cried out, finally gaining control of her voice once more. Her body collapsed onto Tsunade's as she lost all the strength she had to keep herself up. I think you broke her, Tsunade said, seeing Shizune passed out. Maybe I did, Naruto said as he dropped back into the Hokage's chair, panting. How are you still hard? I don't think I can go another round, Tsunade said, seeing Naruto's COC still hard and ready to go. No worries, how about you just clean me off, Naruto suggested. And apparently that was all it took to awake Shizune. I'll help, she said as the two moved to start cleaning off his COK. Tsunade worked his shaft while Shizune tried to suck out any cum that might still have been inside his COK. Damn ladies, I didn't have to twist your arms that much, did I? Naruto asked. Bwe Buvurok, the two said as they worked over his manhood. You should know not to talk with a full mouth, Naruto laughed as he felt their lips leave his COC. They're nice and clean, Shizune said while Tsunade licked her lips. Good girls, I'll see you at home, Tsunade. I expect you over for supper tonight, Naruto said as he stood and started to dress. I'll be there, Tsunade smiled. A certain pink-haired woman laid on her bed, her fingers pressed against her womanhood as she tried to get herself off. Master doesn't fuck me enough, Sakura moaned as she shoved her fingers into her wanting womanhood. All you have to do is ask Sakura, a voice said, alerting the pinkett. Master! Sakura cried happily as she rolled over and looked to Naruto. I thought I told you not to call me master, Naruto said sternly. But I love calling you master, it turns me on so much, Sakura replied as she shook her as trying to tempt Naruto into ucking her. Maybe I should punish you by not fucking you, Naruto said. No. Please ma, Naruto, please uck my sltty with you thick throbbing COC, Sakura begged, spreading her legs more and shaking her as more. Fine, I'll FCK you, but don't think I'll be gentle, Naruto said as he walked over to the S*X addicted pinkett. I want to be showered in you cum, Naruto, Sakura begged. Showered Naruto grinned and made a telltale hand sigh. And before Sakura's eyes 4 more Narutos appeared. Yes. Oh please uck me raw and hard. Sakura cried out as the clones and Naruto all circled her. One clone moved in front of her and without hesitation shoved its COC down her throat. 2 more took each of her hands, making her jerk them off. While the final clone climbed on top of her and shoved his COC into her as dry. The real Naruto moved in and lined his COC up with his pink-haired slew's core and shoved in. Sakura moaned happily as she soused, jerked and grinded against the cocks she was giving. The first clone took a firstful of her hair and yanked on it, forcing her to deep-throat him. While the clones at her sides each took one of her brias in hand and pulled on her nippus. Sakura was nothing but moans as Naruto and his clones abused her with all their thick might. The real Naruto grabbed her IPS, letting himself and his third clone start to slam into her harder. "You're just loving this, aren't you?" Naruto asked. Sakura simply moaned happily onto the first clone's COC as she tried to deep throat his whole length. "Shit, I'm gonna come," all the clones sang out in unison as they blew their loads in and on Sakura. The real Naruto watched as Sakura happily drank down his clone's seed before she started to clean up what the other clones gave her. "Peace out, Slew," the clones said as they vanished. "Only one shot," Sakura said sadly. "I don't usually use my clones for SX so they don't have any stamina," Naruto replied as he ran a hand into Sakura's hair and yanked back, forcing her down onto his COC more. "Oh Kami, yes. You CK me harder," Sakura begged out. Naruto more than willingly gave her what she wanted. But he added more to it. His free hand ran over hers for a moment before he rose his hand and brought it down, spanking her. Sakura cried out in ecstasy the moment his hand cracked over her ass. "God, you've become such a whore," Naruto said as he spanked her again, never slowing his thrusting. Sakura pushed back against his thrusts the best she could as he continued to punish her body. "Yes, I'm a filthy slew that lives for her master's cum," Sakura said, crying out each time his hand cracked over her now red ass. She smashed through her climax when Naruto combined a yank of her hair, a spank to hers, and a particularly hard thrust altogether. Sakura moaned loudly, begging for more, making Naruto chuckle lightly as he watched Sakura writhe in her euphoric release. "What did I tell you about calling me master?" Naruto asked, spanking her between each word. Sakura's body trembled under his abuse as she continued to moan. "I can't help it. I love calling you master," Sakura said, causing Naruto to yank her hair again and force her to lean up so her back rested against his chest. "So you're going to disobey your master by calling me what I've told you not to call me?" Naruto asked as he now slammed up into Sakura. "I'm sorry. Please don't hate me," Sakura said pleadingly. "I could never hate you, Sakura," Naruto said as he reached his release and emptied himself inside of her. "But I need you to be less slave-like if you and the others are going to bear me children," Naruto explained. "Children? I can have you, child?" Sakura asked, looking over her shoulder to Naruto. "Not right away, Hinata. Shizune and Ayame have all asked to bear me a child before you. So they get it first," Naruto said as his IPS started to move again. "I want to be next then, Naruto. Please impregnate me," Sakura begged. "Oh, now I'm Naruto again. Atta girl." Naruto smiled as he started pounding in again. "I love you, Naruto. Please let me have your child," Sakura begged again. "After Hinata, Shizune, and Ayame are then you can," Naruto said as he pulled out and quickly sunk himself into her ass. "Yes. FCK my ass." Sakura moaned loudly as she rested against Naruto's chest. Said blonde snacked a hand over her chest, grabbed her brias and pulling on her knife while his teeth lightly grazed over her neck. "Kami, I love your ass. Always nice and tight no matter how much I uck it," Naruto said as he started to push him limit a second time. He gave Sakura what she wanted. A hard as fucking. "Yes, Naruto, harder, please, fuck me harder." Sakura cried out as she hit another climax and slumped in his arms, unable to keep herself up any longer. "Hold it together, I'm almost there," Naruto said as he let Sakura drop forward as he gripped her IPS tighter and slammed into with everything he had, trying to find his release. "Naruto, Naruto, Naruto," Sakura moaned over and over, doing her best to keep her as tight around his thickness. "Here it comes, Sakura," Naruto said as he blew his load into her ass. Sakura let out her loudest moan yet, feeling his seed pump into hers again. Sure, his clone had taken hers already, but they didn't let out even half as much cum as Naruto did. "Oh Kami, yes," Sakura cried out before she collapsed again. Naruto pulled out and stood up, watching as his seed slowly rolled out of her, abused as in puss. "I need to clean myself up, and so do you," Naruto said as he helped Sakura up and moved towards her bathroom. "I love you, Naruto," Sakura said. "And I you, my pink flower," Naruto replied, kissing her cheek as they moved to get clean. "Welcome to Yamanaka Flowers, let me know if you need help," Ino said as she heard the door open. Her back was currently to the door as she worked on stocking the shelves with more seed bags. How about you blow me? Ino's eyes widened hearing that. She clenched her fists and spun ready to punch. I only fuck my boyfriend Naruto. Ino froze seeing her lover standing before her. Oh, you mean me? Naruto asked as he hopped the counter and smiled at her. Naruto. Ino jumped and wrapped her arms around his neck. I'm so glad you're here, I've been so bored today, Ino explained. Naruto simply laughed as his arms snayed around her. A few short moments passed and their lips met as their eyes closed, simply enjoying their company. So you've been bored, Naruto asked with a sly smirk. Very only 2 people have come in today. And one of those was Shika getting flowers to apologize to his girlfriend for falling asleep during a date, Ino explained. Sounds like Shikamaru. Naruto laughed as his hands moved down onto her ass. So were you serious about that blow? Ino asked. You tell me. Naruto replied, pushing himself against Ino so she could feel his restrained manhood. Ino smirked and ran her hands down his chest. Naruto simply watched as her hands slid along the edge of his pants until they reached his button and zipper. Ino licked her lips lightly before she undid his pants and freed his raging hard-on. Ino kissed Naruto once more before she lowered herself down and took his member into her mouth, sousing at him with no small degree of lust. Her head bobbed back and forth as she got into the groove of her sousing. Naruto ran a hand into her hair as she started to deep-throat him, sousing him harder and faster. Damn it, Ino, you are way too good at this, Naruto said as he leaned back, more enjoying Ino's attention. It's because you taste so damn good, Ino replied with a lusty smile. Naruto laughed, seeing the happy smile on her face while his COC poked her cheek. She returned to her work, kissing his shaft a few times before she started to lick up and down his length. Naruto groaned loudly as Ino started working over his manhood again. She moved from sousing to licking and back as her lust slowly built up more and more. Ino ran her hands down her own body, trying to release some of her pent-up lust. One hand stopped at her breast while the other continued down into her shorts and started to rub her folds. Shit, Ino, I'm going to come, Naruto said as he trembled lightly, feeling a shiver run down his spine just before he reached his release. Ino eagerly gulped down every single shot his COC gave her. After thoroughly cleaning Naruto's COK, Ino stood and smiled at her lover. Kami, I don't know what it is about your cum, but it tastes so good, Ino said while licking her lips. Good to know, now I want to taste you, Naruto said as he lowered himself and undid Ino's shorts. Should Naruto stop and stay down? Someone is coming, Ino said worriedly as she saw someone walking towards the front door. Are you still open? An older woman asked. Of course, Ino said with a smile. Oh, thank Kami. I needed to get flowers for my late husband's grave, the woman said as she moved towards the back of the shop. Let me know if you need help, Ino suddenly shouted. She looked down to see Naruto pulled down her panties to access her womanhood. Are you okay? The older woman asked. Fine, just need something under the counter, Ino replied as she tried to close her legs, but failed miserably since Naruto was already between them, licking at her exposed core. Oh, okay, and no, I don't need help, I know what I want, the woman replied. So do I, Naruto whispered up to Ino before he slid his tongue into her folds. Ino surprisingly managed to fight back a deep moan and only let a small gasp escape her lips. Either the old woman didn't hear the gasp or simply didn't care. Here we go, the older woman placed a dozen flowers on the counter. Ino smiled and managed to keep a straight face while she rung the woman up and wrapped up the flowers. Have yourself a wonderful day, Ino said, still keeping a straight face. I will, you and your boyfriend have a good time, the older woman said as she left with a foxy grin on her face. Ino, on the other hand, was completely embarrassed. Not only had she noticed, but she just had to make a comment. Naruto, you're such an ass, Ino moaned, unable to hold back her moans any longer. You loved every second of it, Naruto replied before he snayed his tongue back into her ussy. Ino grasped onto the counter and moaned loudly. Her climax was getting closer and closer. Ino's nails started to dig into the countertop as she fought back her release, desperate for more attention. Naruto, I can't last, Ino moaned loudly as she reached her climax and trembled heavily. Such a delicious flavor, Naruto laughed as he licked his lips and stood up. Ino bit her lip as she looked up at Naruto. One of her legs moved up the side of his leg, trying to show how badly she wanted him. Naruto gave his trademarked foxy smile, then spun Ino around and put her up on the counter. I'm going to take you right here and right now, Naruto said as he spread Ino's legs and sunk himself into with one thrust. Ino replied in kind with a long loud moan. Before Ino could fully adjust to his girth, he started up his thrusting. Oh Kami Naruto, more please, fuck me more, Ino begged as she wrapped her legs around his waist. Naruto leaned over Ino, supporting himself with one hand while the other roughly groped at her body. Moving from hers to her legs, then up to her breast, his hand wasn't leaving a single spot untouched. And Ino loved every second of it. The feeling of his COC pumping into her, mixing with his rough calloused hand running around her body and now his lips on her neck, was simply too much for her. I can feel you tightening around me, don't hold back, come and come again, Naruto said, and with a hard thrust Ino hit her climax. Ino's head snapped back as she let out another loud moan as her back arched up into Naruto's hand. Naruto chose that moment to pick up his pace. His hand started to grope more and his went from kissing to lightly biting at Ino's neck and collar. Naruto! Ino cried out as she was quickly thrown into another climax. She couldn't handle it when Naruto gave her this much attention. He Brius and next all receiving pleasure at once always drove her wild. Here it comes Ino, Naruto said as he emptied himself into Ino's welcoming folds. Ino replied with an ecstasy-filled scream as her legs tightened around his waist more and her nails raked over the countertop. The two remained connected at the most intimate spot as they panted heavily, still coming down from their orgasmic highs. Naruto regained himself first and slowly pulled out of Ino's puss. I hate it when you pull out, I always feel so empty afterwards, Ino said. I would assume you mean physically. Naruto asked. Of course, I love feeling you inside me, so much so that I hate it when you leave me, it just feels right to have you in me, Ino explained. Well, give it a few months and my COK won't be the only thing in you, Naruto said with a sly grin. You're going to impregnate me? Ino asked. Of course, but a few others have asked, so I'll make sure they're carrying before I just make all of you mothers, Naruto explained as he dressed. I can't wait, Ino said excitedly. Can my child have the Namikaze name? Ino asked. Sure, he or she can, Naruto said, and he gave Ino a kiss, then moved to the door, watching as she redressed herself. I look forward to the long and hard process of impregnating me, at least I hope it's long and hard, Ino said with a sultry smile. Oh, it will be, Naruto said as he left. Naruto walked through his clan compound, heading towards his bedroom to lay down for a few before dinner. He opened his door and instantly noticed a form lying on his bed. The form was stark new, her features only hidden by her unbelievably long auburn hair. May, what are you doing here? Naruto asked, finally gaining his voice once more. I've stepped down from Mizukage so I could start a family, and I chose to do so here in the Hidden Leaf, May replied as her eyes drank her in lover's form. It's wonderful to see you, Naruto said as he crossed the room. May bit her lip lightly as Naruto climbed up between her legs. Naruto, I'm not pregnant, May said, knowing he was probably worried about it with how much they had done it and the lack of a condom. I have to say I'm surprised, Naruto said with a smile while he kissed her stomach. But I'll just have to try harder next time, he added as he now kissed in between May's ample cleavage. Oh, I've missed your lips on me, May moaned lightly. Naruto continued to kiss his way up May's body, enjoying the taste of her skin and the light moans she gave him. Once his lips met hers, all of the desire for each other overflowed. May pulled back and gave a sly smile before she rolled them over and straddled Naruto. I'm going to ride you, just like a bronco, May said with a lusting grin. Now that sounds good, Naruto said as he watched May undo his pants and free his raging heart on. She didn't wait for him to tell her or for even a word to be spoken before she slid herself down on his COC. Kami. Yes, I've missed this, May cried out as her IPS started to bounce on Naruto's COC. Naruto ran his hands up her legs, stopping at her IPS to help her bounce on him. Damn it, you're so fucking tight, Naruto groaned as he started to thrust up, meeting May's bounces. May smiled and leaned down, locking her lips with Naruto's as her body continued to ride him. Her hands ran into his hair, entangling her fingers as she passionately kissed him. Naruto, I love you, Mei said after their kiss broke. And I you, Naruto replied with a foxy smile. Mei smiled happily and sat back up, taking her bouncing into high gear. God, I love those tits, Naruto said as he sat up and took one of her nipples into his mouth. Mei's moans started to echo out as she neared her climax. Naruto, 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 Mei moaned out again and again. She was completely lost in her lust and the heat of their loving. Mei drew closer and closer to her climax. She felt like her body was on fire as she rode Naruto. I'm going to come, Naruto groaned loudly. Almost. Just a little bit more, Mei cried out as she hooked her arms around his neck and kissed him. Naruto lost himself in that moment and emptied himself into Mei's womanhood. The feeling of his seed filling her pushed Mei over the edge of her climax. She let out a long loud moan as she rode her climax. Mei was so lost in her release that she didn't notice that Naruto had picked her up and pinned her to the wall before he started to drill into her again. Mei wrapped her legs around Naruto's waist and ran her hands into his hair again. Their lips met once more as their bodies pressed together. Naruto's IPS never slowed as their tongues battled for dominance. His hands groped at her as needing them as he pushed her against the wall. Mei, your body is too damn good, Naruto said as he pumped into her with everything he had. Mei simply moaned in response, unable to actually form words. Her mind was completely blank, nothing mattered but the blonde man that was currently pounded the hell out of her. Coming. Mei screamed as she reached another climax. Her nails raked down the back of his neck and shoulders while her toes curled and her back arched. UCK, that hurt, Naruto grunted as the shock of the pain pushed him over the edge and he emptied himself into her once more. Mei collapsed forward into Naruto, pushing him back onto his bed. Naruto smiled as he rolled Mei over, putting her onto her hands and knees. Mei looked over her shoulder and smiled before she started to shake her as for him. She licked her lips lustfully as she watched Naruto start to rub his thickness between her cheeks. Oh, ready and waiting, Mei moaned, feeling his COC head pushing against her rear entrance. Glad to hear it, Naruto smiled as he sunk himself into his. Mei quickly bit down on the pillow in front of her to stop her from screaming as hers was, at least it felt like it was, torn open. Damn, it's tight, Naruto said as he grabbed her IPS, trying his best not to blow right away. Naruto waited a few moments, feeling her adjust to him before he felt her push back against him slightly, letting him know it was okay to start up again. Mei braced herself as Naruto slowly started to pump in and out of her. OUCK, it's good. Damn, it is that good, Mei thought as she started to push back against his COC again. Naruto chuckled as he started to move faster, seeing Mei loved it. Enjoying it, are we? Naruto asked. Kami, yes. FCK my as please. Mei cried out as Naruto obeyed and started to pound into her as with reckless abandon. The tightness of her anal walls proved too much for Naruto, pushing him towards his release far faster than he wanted to go. Mei, I'm gonna come, Naruto groaned and he blew his load straight into Mei's ass. Mei in return bit down on the pillow again as she screamed in ecstasy. Naruto slumped forward, panting heavily as he did. The two pulled apart after a few moments as they smiled at each other. I love you, Naruto, Mei said as she kissed Naruto. I love you too, Mei, Naruto replied, kissing her back. Now I believe dinner should be ready, so let's get dressed and get some grub. You're going to need your energy tonight, after all you're behind on SX race, Naruto laughed as he stood and dressed. Thanks for listening. In the next part. In the meantime, please leave a review, I would love to hear your feedback. Especially if it helps me improve the overall story.